Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries that I just found out about over the past week. I don't have a whole lot for you this week, but I do have one, and a lot of you might like this one and a lot of you might hate it depending on what you think of the franchise. But there is a new board game coming out that's going to be using the Call of Duty IP, and this is going to be a 2-player game out of the box, but you will be able to mix multiple sets in order to play with up to 4. The game's going to offer you a whole bunch of different maps, but then also allow you a few different options when you want to approach your enemy, whether you want to go more stealthily or if you want to go guns a-blazing. And it looks like this is going to be a tactical combat game that's going to be using dice rolling, hidden movement, as well as simultaneous action selection. I don't have an exact date on this one yet, but it will be launching at some point in the fall, and I will provide more information as it becomes available. And of course, I will be covering this in more detail in the week of its launch, so if you do want to hear more about this one, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on that content. And we're already breaking into the month of May this week, and time's just flying by, and it's not going to be long before the Level Up retreat takes place in the month of July, and I will be attending this one, and I really do hope to see you there, and I really mean that. So if you are going, feel free to reach out to me on Discord or reach out to me through my website, and I'll be happy to try and meet up and play some games. But also, if you are going, I would love to help save you some money. So go ahead and use this coupon code when you go to checkout. It'll save you 10 bucks on whatever ticket you decide to buy. And if you do go, like I said, feel free to reach out to me. I'll do my best to meet up with you and hang out at least for a bit. And on the note of these months just flying by, Alex does put out a video at the start of each month letting you know of all the board games that we know about so far that will be launching within that month. And he is just about to put out his video for the month of May. So if you want to stay up to date with this never-ending flood of games, make sure to subscribe to his channel. He has a ton of other great content as well. But if you're interested in videos just like this one, you'll definitely want to check that out. But on the topic of upcoming games, we should probably get to it, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on May 1st, and this one's called Archangelis. And this is a 2-player game that takes about 20 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a deck builder where players are going to be starting out the game, each with a commander card, and you're going to be putting this out in front of you, and that's going to be giving you some sort of permanent bonus for the rest of the game. You only ever get one of these throughout the entirety of the game, but there are some other cards known as title cards that you can purchase throughout the game and can be put out in front of you in just the same way. Players begin the game with the same set of starter cards, but you will be able to buy more cards and manipulate your deck as the game goes on. But your cards are mostly going to be doing one of two things. They're going to be either giving you some buying power, or they're going to be giving you some fighting power. Some cards can do a combination of both, or have some other effects like providing upgrades to other cards that you might have in play. The game kind of plays in 2 phases, where your first goal of the game is to try and capture 3 location cards, and there's going to be 3 put out at the start of the game, but then more are going to be added as the game goes on. But then once a player is able to capture 3 different locations, then it's going to trigger a final battle, and then players are going to be gaining cards based on the locations that they were able to capture. That's going to be giving you more power for that final battle. So capturing the different locations doesn't guarantee you the win, but it does put you in a better position because it's going to give you more cards to choose from. But in this game, players are going to be alternating turns back and forth, and on a player's turn, they're going to be drawing 3 cards into their hand from their draw deck, and then they have the option to either play some of their cards or to host a challenge. If you decide to play some of your cards, you're going to be playing them into your area in front of you out on the table. But one thing to note here is that there is 2 types of cards. There's the angel cards and the demon cards. And they do work very similar to each other, except it's the angel cards that are going to be used in order to attack the different locations and try to claim them as your own. And then it's the demon cards that are going to be trying to prevent that for your opponent. The main market's going to be repopulated from these 2 decks, but it's up to you to decide which decks you want to draw from to repopulate the market when you go ahead and buy cards. Any of the cards that you use for their spending power are going to be going into your discard pile, but then all the other cards are going to be remaining in play in front of you, but you will be separating your angel cards from your demon cards. And there are some additional rules with how the demon cards play because you can only have certain cards out at the same time. But like I said, you don't have to play cards on your turn. The other option is to host a challenge. And whenever you do that, you're going to be declaring one of the locations out on the board. And then you're going to be trying to capture it by issuing angel cards from your play area towards that location, trying to end up with a strength higher than the strength of that location. You do have to be careful here though, because each location is going to have specific rule changes that could change the fundamentals of play and might make some of your cards more powerful or ineffective depending on what those rules say. This is when the demon cards also come into play, because if your opponent has any demon cards in their play area, then they can choose to issue those towards the location as well, and those will essentially be having some negative effects on your angel cards, maybe getting rid of some of them or also changing some of the ways that those cards might play, and that might end up with you having a lower overall strength than the location that you're trying to take over, and in that case you would not win the location and your turn would be over. And the game continues like this until one of the players captures 3 locations, and then that's going to trigger the final battle. And the way that that works is that each player is going to be looking at the location cards that they've captured, and each of those is going to give that player options for adding cards into a new hand. Once players have created their hand, they're going to be comparing them to see who has the highest strength, and then that player wins the game. A really interesting endgame here, because it's not necessarily the player with the most locations that's going to win the game, but it does tip the odds in their favor. But if this one sounds interesting to you, you can find links in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified once this campaign launches. And launching on May 2nd, we have Clank Legacy 2 Acquisitions Incorporated Darkest Magic. And this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 1 to 2 hours to play. And this one is also our Discord pick of the week. And it's no surprise, because the Clank series of games is a fantastic series, which I think does a great service to the genre of deck building games while also incorporating an aspect of push your luck. But if you're not familiar with any of the Clank games, each player is going to be starting out the game with a starter deck of cards. You're going to be drawing cards into your hand every turn, and these cards can issue you money, which you can use to buy more cards from the market, or they could give you strength, which you could use to defeat enemies for different bonuses, or they could issue you movement, which will allow you to move around on the board, activating different location effects, or gaining different treasure or items that you'll be carrying around with you until the end of the game. But of course there is a catch here, and with these Clank games, it is usually in the form of a sleeping dragon, because a lot of these actions that you perform will generate something known as Clank, which you can kind of think of as noise. And the more of this that you generate, the more likely it is that the dragon's going to attack you when the dragon decides to wake up. Push your luck comes into play because players are going to be trying to gather up as much treasure and victory points as possible, while trying not to generate too much noise, but then also trying to escape with that treasure. And the end of the game is triggered either when a player escapes with one of the artifacts, or if a player takes so many hits from the dragon that they end up getting knocked out. At either of those points, every other player is going to have one final turn to try and escape the dungeon, and then players are going to be adding up their victory points, gaining bonuses if they're able to escape the dungeon, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And of course, the legacy version of this game is going to be adding some additional elements, and there is already a legacy version that you can go and purchase now, and that is Acquisitions Incorporated. And the legacy version of this game is primarily competitive, just like those original Clank games, but this new sequel is also going to be adding a cooperative mode. But something that I think is really interesting about the legacy versions of Clank is that rather than having the same endgame triggers for every single game, you're actually going to be playing through a campaign with different missions that can have different goals and endgame triggers that vary from game to game. Not only that, but the campaign can also go down some different branching paths depending on the decisions that either individual players make or that the players make as a whole from within a game. Players will be jumping between 2 different worlds as they progress throughout the campaign. There is the underworld, and then there is the overworld, and each of these is going to be printed on one side of a double-sided board, and these are each going to have some starting locations printed on them, but then players are going to be unlocking different stickers throughout the game, and you'll be able to add that to the board to modify it however you see fit, adding some new locations, but then also gaining stickers that you can put on those locations to modify their effects. And the overall structure of these boards does affect all the players, but then each individual player will also have the opportunity to use different legacy elements in order to modify their individual characters, choosing between different options and bonuses that they'll be able to apply and grow throughout the game. And if you're someone like me that tends to find a lot of deck builders tend to feel a little bit samey after a while, this might be one that breaks the mold. Although it does have deck building as a core element here, it does also have that element of your character out on the board, which you're manipulating with your cards. So it's not just about having the best cards, it's about playing the right cards at the right time, positioning yourself well, and taking calculated risks, especially with the push your luck elements that are prevalent in this game. And another really nice thing that this Legacy version offers is that once you complete that Legacy campaign, you're actually going to be ending up with 2 different Clank boards that are unique to you, and you can just go ahead and apply regular Clank rules to play regular Clank on those boards. So once you've completed the Legacy campaign, you don't have to throw all the work that you did out. You can just actually continue to play it as if it was just a normal non-Legacy version of Clank. Really awesome stuff here, and if you are interested, check it out. I do have links in the description below. Also launching on May 2nd, we have the Rings of Saturn. This plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive racing game where players are going to be racing down the Rings of Saturn, trying to be the first to get to the planet. Players will be gaining cards throughout the game to upgrade their ship and crew, but also to generate resources each and every one of their turns. Because at the start of your turn, you're going to be generating resources based on those cards that you have, as well as the results of a dice roll. Players will then have to individually decide how they want to spend their resources. They can either use them to buy those upgrades that I mentioned before, which will make all your actions just a little bit more efficient moving forward, or instead you can pay to move on to the next Ring of Saturn, taking you closer to the planet, but at the cost of upgrading your ship. An event card is going to be drawn at the end of every round, which can have negative effects on the players, but the game continues like this with players generating resources, using those resources to progress towards the planet or upgrade their ship, and then dealing with different anomalies. And of course, the first player that makes it to Saturn wins the game. And if you're interested in this one, I have links to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 2nd, we have the Hunters AD 1492, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative campaign miniatures game where players are going to be playing together as monster hunters. Players are going to be exploring a giant map, exploring the map and discovering and playing different missions that they discover. And players are going to be traveling around this world with their wagon in tow that you'll be able to upgrade throughout the game. And your wagon is essentially a place where you'll be able to store equipment and tools, as well as craft new equipment that you'll be able to use in future missions. Each mission can happen at a different time of day or during different weather conditions, and have all sorts of different circumstances that the players are going to want to prepare for. This means that you might want to be picking and choosing from the items that you have available in your wagon that will best prepare you for that mission. And of course, players will be playing as asymmetrical characters with their own unique stats and abilities, and you'll also be able to level up your characters throughout the game. The larger world is going to be represented by these different location cards that are going to be laid out in a grid, and players will be able to discover more of these as the game progresses, and you'll also be able to jump back and forth between different locations as you see fit. Of course, these different locations are going to have all sorts of different opportunities that are going to be outlined in the campaign booklet, and players can explore deeper into these different locations by visiting different regions guided by the campaign booklet, and then turning to the appropriate page in this other booklet that has all sorts of different boards and areas where you'll engage in different exploration or combat. Players and enemies are going to be activating in their initiative order, which is outlined on the enemy cards or each personal player's card. During the enemy activations, they'll just be moving towards the enemies and then performing an attack once they're in range. And there might also be some extra abilities or effects that could come into play. But on a player's turn, they're going to be able to perform 2 actions per turn. They'll have a few different basic actions that they can perform, like moving, attacking, or interacting with different areas of the board. But they can also spend resources to play action cards from their hand to perform a wide variety of effects. Combat in this game is resolved using dice rolling to determine if the hits are a success, and you will also be rolling for different skill checks if you tried to perform different actions or interactions throughout the game. But of course, your different stats, items, and abilities can also come into play here. If you're a fan of narrative campaigns, this one provides a ton of story as well, and if you want to know more about this one, I do have links in the description below, and if you follow now, you'll also get a free world map poster added to your pledge. Also launched on May 2nd, we have Skytear Horde Monoliths, and this is going to be a standalone expansion to that original game. I couldn't find a whole lot of info on how this new expansion is going to play or how it plays differently from that original game, but I did have some footage covering Skytear Horde when they launched their original campaign, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. But if you want to see exactly what's different and what this new version is going to be adding to the game, definitely go ahead and check the campaign, and I'll have a link to that in the description below. And this is a really interesting one for a few reasons. This one's inspired by tower defense video games, but then it plays similarly to one of those head-to-head card battlers like Keyforge. The thing that really sets this apart from all those games is that this one was designed first and foremost as a solo or cooperative game, but if you are also interested in competitive, this does offer it as well in a one versus many mode. But the way that this game works is you're going to mix and match a few choices at the start of the game. You're going to be choosing a castle to defend, but then you're also going to be choosing your legendary heroes that you're going to be using to rally your troops with, and then you're going to be choosing the alliance decks that you want to include in the game. And there are a few different pre-made decks that you can choose from, but as you get more familiar with the game, you can also mix some of these decks together and create different varieties that don't come exactly pre-made out of the box. And to play the game, you're going to be going up against hordes of monsters that are swarming from a spawn gate. And you're going to be defending in 6 different lanes, and this picture outlines a little bit of what that looks like. Different monsters are going to be approaching through different lanes, and you're going to be issuing your cards out into the play area, and then any cards that are in line with another monster in that lane are going to go head to head and attack each other. But if there is not a monster in that lane, then you're going to instead attack the spawn gate that the monsters are coming from, and your goal is to try and destroy that gate. But if there's any monsters that are in a lane that you are not defending, then they're going to be able to strike your castle. And of course you lose if your castle is destroyed or if you run out of cards. And the interesting thing about this game is that you do not draw cards every time it is your turn. Instead, you earn cards by performing different feats in the game and destroying different monsters. So you really want to keep that in mind, and you really have to manage the cards that you have and try not to lose them carelessly. And that definitely can happen because there are smaller monsters that can come out of that spawn gate, but rather than going into the typical lanes to attack you, they're going to go around the lanes and just start pilfering your castle. These monsters don't stick around too long and they'll leave on their own, but if you allow them to do that, they're going to be stealing a few cards of yours, which are a precious commodity in this game. So you might want to attack them as well to try and stop them in their tracks. If you survive long enough and you're able to take out those spawn gates, then eventually you're going to be going up against the Outsider, which is sort of a final boss in this game. And this is going to be an epic showdown where if you come out successful, you will win the game. And this is one of those games that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't keeping an eye on this game, but as I did more and more research to do this video, I just got more and more interested in this game. And everything I'm seeing from it looks really solid. And a cooperative card battler is not a game that I currently have in my collection, so there's definitely a spot for this one, and I'm really interested to learn more on the mechanisms of how you earn cards in this game because that's something that I really haven't seen before and sounds really cool. Also launching on the 2nd, we have Cities of Venus, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are going to be building up their own personal city on Venus. Each player is going to have their own personal player board, which represents the city, and there's going to be different regions on it representing its shield, its food supply, its air supply, its mining capabilities, as well as its science. Each round, players are going to be revealing 5 resource cards that are resources sent from Earth, and these are going to be placed out into the center of the board, and I will come back to these later. Throughout the game, players will be placing workers on the different areas of their city, and on every round you're going to be losing 1 worker from your shield space. Players will then have the opportunity to grow their population, and the way that the population works is that you have a food area on your board and you have an air area of the board, and whichever of those areas have the least amount of workers, that is the amount of workers that you are going to grow in your population. So you want to try and grow both those areas as evenly as possible. When a player's population grows, you'll be placing those new workers onto your board as well, and you'll be able to decide where you want those to go. At this point in the game, players will have the option to discard any of the workers that they currently have in the mining area of their board. And whenever you discard a worker from that location, you'll be able to roll a die and then gain an amount of resources based on that specific die roll. And it's at this point in the game where those resource cards come back into play because players will be taking turns drafting those from the shared pool. But in order to take those cards, there's going to be a few requirements that you have to meet. Firstly, they could have a resource amount that you'll have to pay in order to be able to take that card, but then they can also have a requirement of having a certain amount of workers in a certain area of your board, and that's why it's so important to be managing this and planning ahead to make sure that you have your workers in the right locations of your board to allow you to take the cards that you want. And these cards can have all sorts of powerful benefits, but the coolest thing about them is that some of them can be used to upgrade the different areas of your personal player board, adding more capacity, victory point potential, or other effects that you'll be able to take advantage of for the rest of the game. And the game continues like this, with players upgrading their population, gaining more resources and minerals, and then grabbing those resource cards and upgrading their ship for varying effects. And the player with the most victory points from their various upgrades, from their total population and number of acquired minerals, is going to be the player that wins the game. And if this one sounds interesting to you, I have links to the campaign in the description below where you can go ahead and check it out. And launching on March 3rd, we have Gold Nugget. This plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 15 to 25 minutes to play. And in this game, players are going to be playing as different animals, each with their own abilities. And the whole goal of this game is to try and find the golden nugget hidden within a raven's nest. The raven has currently left the nest and it's safe to go investigate, and players will be starting the game by drawing 5 animal cards into their den as well as 2 stones. Players will be using their cards to view, collect, and rearrange those stones, and generally just gather more information on where that golden nugget might be. These cards can also cause negative effects to the players, where you might be able to confuse them as to where that gold nugget is, or even plant raven feathers onto their den. There's periodic events that can happen throughout the game where the raven might fly overhead, and if you're caught with too many raven feathers on you, that raven's going to target you, which can set back some of your efforts. There's also a really interesting aspect of the game here that because all the players are animals, they also periodically need to sleep. And whenever a player sleeps, they're going to have to close their eyes, and that's an opportunity to miss out on the information that some of the other players might be doing. But essentially, players are trying to gather information and discover where that golden nugget is, and then try to track it throughout the game while preventing the same for your opponents. And at the end of the game, the raven's going to return, and all players are going to have to close their eyes, count to 3, and then open them and try to be the first to slap their hand on the stone that they believe is the golden nugget. If you got that right and you're the first person to have slapped it, then you are the winner of the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but of course this video wouldn't be complete without a few awesome giveaways, and the first one we have is for a pledge for Pioneer Rails. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a flip and write game where every single round you're going to be flipping a few poker cards, then you're going to be choosing one of those to add to your sheet. Depending on the suit of the card, you'll be able to expand a station matching that suit, which will allow you to draw in different areas of your sheet in order to connect towns, visit different areas, and unlock more resources. You'll then be able to use those resources to get victory points or build bridges and tunnels to access other parts of your sheet. As you're playing through the rounds, you're going to be gathering more and more poker cards onto your sheet, and at the end of 5 rounds, players are going to be gaining victory points based on the poker hand that they're able to put together. And I really like that aspect of the game because it means there's multiple things you need to consider when selecting your card. Not only are you trying to pick the one that is the most beneficial to you when it comes to expanding your tracks, but you're also going to be pulled in different directions depending on the poker hands that might be available to you. And of course, the game's going to be continuing like this over a series of rounds, and then at the end of the game, the player with the most victory points is going to be the one to win the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the deluxe version of the game, which comes with everything in the base game, plus some additional maps, upgraded tokens, additional cards, and a few additional expansions as well. And under this giveaway, all you have to do is leave a comment down below. Any comment will do, but if you want to have some fun, let us know what your cool cowboy or cowgirl name would be if you lived in the time of Pioneer Rails. For myself, I think it's pretty obvious that I would be the Wild Atom Gunslinger Singer. Good luck in the giveaway, but that's not all because we do have another one here, and this one is for Tactigon, which is a 2-player strategy game, and this one has a rule set that's very easy to learn and play. Essentially, each of your units come in a different shape, and the shape represents how many movement points those units have. So a circle has 1 movement point, whereas a square would have 4, and then the pentagon would have 5. But the interesting thing here is that the inverse is true when it comes to their attack power, because the more movement points they have, the less ability they have to attack the other units. But there are two ways to win this game. You can either be the first player to get 2 of your units on these different yellow squares by the end of your opponent's turn, or you can be the first player to capture your opponent's pentagon. Players will just be alternating their turns back and forth, moving their units and making attacks on the opposing player's units, following the combat grid that only allows certain units to attack other units. And this giveaway is going to be for the Founders Pledge, which gets you a serialized first edition copy of the game, as well as recognition in their rulebook, and even foiled green and red Pentagon pieces. And to enter this giveaway, just like before, all you have to do is leave a comment down below, and just like before, you can leave any comment that you like. But if you want to have a little bit of fun, maybe you could let us know which one of these shapes speaks to you most as your spirit shape. Are you more like the circle that is strong but slow, or are you more like the pentagon that is really quick but maybe needs some help opening a jar of pickles? Or do you lay somewhere in between? For myself, I am definitely a bit of a tank. I don't move too quickly, but I can make my way through anything. I mean, I can run pretty fast and probably for a decent amount of time, but I feel like I'm running purely on willpower because I'm just in complete agony anytime I try to do it. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway. And this one was for a pledge for the Paperback campaign that you can go ahead and check out on Kickstarter now. You'll definitely want to check this one out if you are a fan of spelling and word games, because this one offers 2 different games that both look like a ton of fun. But to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are extra names for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and appreciate all the work I put into these videos each and every week, I do appreciate you checking out the Patreon if you are in a position to do so. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Paperback is Magnus Jacobson, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, a patron for quite a long time. I think this is the first time your name's been drawn, so congratulations. This looks like a really fun game, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'll reach out to you and get that pledge all sorted out, or feel free to email me at adam@shelfclutter.com. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week. I don't really have too much else to say in these closing comments. I've just been busy spending my time either working or looking at houses, trying to find one that's within my price range that can fit me along with all my board games. But I did find the time to play one very small game, and that was Mindbug Beyond, which just had a campaign on Kickstarter. They should be having a late pledge opening up very soon. But I just wanted to mention that I am really impressed with that game. It's just like the original Mindbug if you like that, but it does add some other mechanisms onto the game as well in the form of some special actions which you can do on your turn rather than your 2 options of either playing a card or attacking with a card. But I'm just really impressed with the amount of game that they were able to get into a single deck of cards, but then also solve basically every single issue that I had with Keyforge. And I know with Keyforge, it has that really cool aspect where you have all these different permutations of possible decks of cards, and every single deck is unique. Something that's really cool with Mindbug is that you still do get that experience of these different permutations because there is a whole deck of cards, and at the start of the game, you're just dealing out 10 of those to your opponent and 10 of those to yourself. And there are still a whole bunch of different cards in the deck, which means that every single time you play, you're going to be getting a completely different combination. The campaign did just end, so I don't think they have their pledge manager open for late pledges yet, but I think you can sign up to get notified when they do. But I might mention it again in the future because I can easily recommend this one. It's just a ton of fun. Quite a lot in a single deck of cards, which also just makes it really affordable and accessible to almost anyone. I don't really do reviews, so this is about the closest that you'll get out of me, but as always, thanks so much for watching. I do appreciate you checking out the video and staying along until the end. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.